the Tamils.
This book is a personal journey of discovery. What it signifies to be part of this distinct group of people, the Tamils, dissimilar in many ways from their fellow Indians, yet bound by numerous similarities. The peaks of the Himalayas are ours, sang Bharati, expressing the strong pan-Indian connection that many Tamils feel.
Mannum imaya malai, engal malaiye, மாநில மீதிது போர் பிரிதில்லை இன்னரு நீர் கங்கை ஆறுங்கள் ஆரே பொன்னொளிர் பாரத நாடுங்கள்
செந்தமிழ்நாடெனும் போதினிலே இன்பத்தேன் வந்து பாயது காதினிலே
காவிரி தென் பெண்ணை பாலாறு தமிழ் கண்டதோர்வையை பொருணை நதி எனமே பலவோட திருமேனி செழித்த தமிழ்நாடு.
The ancient Tamils classified the topography of Tamilagam, their land, into 5 distinct categories, symbolized by a flower indigenous to that region. The Kurunji, a rare mountain bloom.
Malai, the fragrant jasmine flourishing in the forest.
The blue water lily of Neidal, representative of the seashore.
The desert flower of Palai, emblematic of the arid lands.
And Marudam, also known as the queen's flower of the lowlands.
The Kurunji landscape stands for the mountainous region of Tamilakam.
These people, called Kuravar, Vedar, Kanavar, despite being honey gatherers, are also hunters. The deity that they worship is Murugan, and the associated mother goddess is Kottravai.
The cool climbs of the verdant hillsides represent various moods and emotions. All these are revealed in the exquisite poetry of the time.
The emotions associated with Marudam Thinnai is the joyful meeting and union of lovers. Ponds and lakes dancing with freshwater fish, lazy buffaloes soaking up the sun, with the main deity being Indra.
Mullai Thinnai is associated with forests and the heroine's grief at separation from her lover. Cowherds and shepherds with their sheep grazing on the pasture lands. Its local deity Mayon, an early form of Krishna or Vishnu. The holes imprinted on the back of white conch shells underfoot the natal lands echo the patterns of the universe. Bamboo and long grass blanched by the summer heat along the desert pathways of the dry Mullai surfaces symbolize life's challenging journey. Secret waterfalls concealed within hidden hillsides and the scent of red earth mingled with the pouring rain can transform into an unexpected union of young lovers.
யாயும் யாயும் யாராகியரோ எந்தையும் நுந்தையும் எம்முறை கேளே யானும் நீயும் எவ்வழியறிதும் செம்புல பெயரீர் போல அன்புடை நெஞ்சம் அன்புடை நெஞ்சம் தாங்கலந்தனவே.
A land effulgent in green, yet dotted with teeming towns and cobbled streets, where merchants sold their wares from distant shores, and women adorned in sapphire ornaments yearned for their secret lovers. And poets wrote about the valor of kings.
This was the kind of civilization that flourished in the southern peninsula of India, and whose story was largely brought to light and sourced from poetry written on palm leaf manuscripts.
Because much of the information about that age comes from the literature of the time and the confluence of poets.
Tamil Sangam poetry, compositions that are over 2,500 years old.
The custodians of this civilization's values were the dreamers, poets, bards, and storytellers.
The poems deal with love, death,
War, nature, philanthropy, heroism, courage, and relationships. In short, the entire range of the human experience.
All with such sophistication.
and they embody values but do not speculate or philosophize.
They were composed not just by poet scholars,
Also by women, priests, chieftains, peasants, merchants, and warriors.
And also by those who labored as blacksmiths or potters.
women poets like Avvayar,
Tolkappiyam.
who were not necessarily noble born, served as ambassadors and advisors to several kings. And the Tolkappiyam, which is the grammatical treatise, has 3 books dealing with units of literary practice, from letters and words to content. It classifies poetry into aham, the inner world, and puram, the external.
Whether the Tamils were the original inhabitants of India or wanderers who came from the Indus Valley is not a settled question.
The land they occupied and thrived in was the southernmost region of India.
Most of the actual information about heroes and chieftains, including those ruling in tribal areas,
comes from the poetic anthologies of the Sangam age, which, such as the Puranuru.
There are descriptions that suggest the existence of an impartial justice system. And although an autocracy, the accessibility of rulers was a noteworthy feature of ancient Tamilagam.
The poet Kapilar was also an advisor and later became a very close friend of Pari, the chieftain, about whom stories have been told and retold over generations.
The edicts of Emperor Ashoka, the grandson of Chandragupta Maurya, mention the Tamil kingdoms of the Cholas, Pandyas, and the Cheras in the 2nd century BCE. The port of Puhar is celebrated in works like Pattinapalai as the place where big ships docked and emptied their merchandise on the beaches.
under the guardianship of the gods of enduring glory. Horses with a noble gait had come by the sea.
Bagfuls of black pepper had been brought in by carts.
Gems and gold born of the northern mountains, sandal and eagle from the western mountains.
The coral of the Western Sea, the products of the Ganges Valley, the yield of the Kaveri, the foodstuffs from Ceylon.
All these materials, precious and bulky alike, were heaped onto the broad streets, overflowing with their riches.
It was perfectly acceptable for a Kshatriya to marry a woman of a higher caste.
A Brahmin could become a king.
The Vaishya could engage in war or handle weapons.
Social organization did not appear to be based on birth, but rather on occupation.
And although by the time of the Sangam, the Aryan influence was very much present, it could be argued on the basis of the historical evidence we have at present that the social construct that prevailed in Tamilagam of that period was still largely defined by the landscape.
Where residents of certain regions chose to find particular occupations suitable to that terrain.
Of course, it was not the perfect society as often espoused in the poetry. Women, for instance, were mostly well regarded, but a lot of the widows was grim. And they were relegated to the edges of society.
Many of the Aham poems have women as protagonists. Even if they are prostitutes or those who have taken another woman's man, there is a strong and not necessarily censorious articulation of their situation. The voices of women are clear, and women are central in the world of Aham poetry.
A fluidity of religious practice seems to have prevailed with the peaceful coexistence of Jainism and Buddhism, which had entered Tamaragam perhaps even around the time of the Emperor Ashoka.
The Kalabras.
A group called the Kalabras disrupted the rule of many of the chieftains and kings and took over most of Tamaragam and held the Tamil lands for about 300 years post the Sangam age. There are no historical details available at all about this period of Tamil history, except the Pulangurchi inscription of a king called Chendan Kuran, ascribed to 3rd century CE.
Oh, to the lions, Bhakti poetry, and the Pallava dynasty.
The Pallava dynasty was the first large consolidated South Indian empire, and they ruled about 400 plus years.
Simhavishnu was the Pallava king known for reviving the dynasty by defeating the Kalabras, expanding the territory to the Kaveri River, and establishing Kanchipuram as the capital.
Son of Simhavishnu, Mahendravarman I was the Pallava ruler who began the celebrated tradition of rock-cut temples, introducing new elements and styles of sculpting.
Mahendravarman I was also an intellectual, known as Vichitrachita or curious-minded. He was also a poet and a painter and had the title of Chitrapuli, meaning a tiger of the arts.
He was also an architect, a musician, a dramatist, polymath, and warrior.
He was initially a follower of Jainism, reconverted to Saivism at the instigation of Tirunavakarasan, the Saivite saint.
மூடிக்கொண்டார் முளையிளவெண் திங்களோடு மூசும் இளநாகம் உடனா கொண்டார் தத்தீம் தகதீம் ததிங்கிணத்தும் தகதி தளாங்கு தோம் அடிகொண்டார் சிலம்பு அலம்பு கடலும் ஆர்படுங்காத முயலகனை அடிகீழ் கொண்டார் தித்தளாங்கு தித்தளாங்கு தித்தி தளாங்கு தகதறி கிடத்துக்கு தோம் வடி கொண்டு ஆர்ந்த இலங்கு பழுவலங்கை கொண்டார் மாலை இடபாகத்தே மருவ கொண்டார் திமித திமித தீம் ஜெயம் ஜெயம் தகிட தகதீம் தகதோம் தகததிங்கிணத்தும் துடி கொண்டார் கங்காளம் தோள் மேல் கொண்டார் சூலை தீர்த்து அடியேனை ஆட்கொண்டாரே.
The Bhakti movement, which saw a reinvigoration of Saivism and Vaishnavism, took firm root during Mahendravarman's time.
It was not just the use of Tamil in the hymns and poems that drew the public to this movement, but also the fact that these saints belonged to a variety of castes: Brahmins, cobblers, farmers, merchants, princes, and even robbers.
Between the 5th and 9th centuries, the Alvars were responsible for the spread of Vaishnavism, or the specific worship of Vishnu Narayana as the supreme Godhead.
வையம் தகளியா வையம் தகளியா வையம் தகளியா வார்கடலே நீயாக நிசக கம கமக சக சக சனி 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 பனி சக வெய்ய கதிரோன் விளக்காக பம பகம பசகம பனி பம பம கம பம பனிசா செய்ய சுடராழியான் அடிக்கு சூட்டினேன் சொல் மாலை இடராழி நீங்குகவே.
A verse on Vishnu by Poigai Alvar.
The poetry of the Bhakti saints, whether of the Vaishnavite or Saivite canon, imagined the divine in all possible forms, as lover, as parent, as friend, and as child.
The Shaivite hymns known as Tevaram and the 4,000 verses on Vishnu, the Nalaye Divya Prabandham, being sung in temples is a practice that continues to this day.
Rajasimha, another flamboyant Pallava ruler, went on to build numerous other temples.
One is the unique Kailasanada temple, which was built around the same time as many of the Marmala temples, around 700 CE.
The Kailasanatha temple, its opulent array of carvings on its walls and niches. The Yalis, a mythological creature with the head and the body of a lion and the trunk and tusks of an elephant. The Bhutaganas, or the divine servitors expressing merriment, and other carved tears 4 stories tall, speaking of the splendor of Shiva in every possible form. Shiva, the cosmic dancer. Shiva in battle. Shiva, the sublime. Shiva, the bearer of the Ganga, and Shiva as Kala Samaharamurti, the destroyer of death and time. One of the most beautiful sculptures is that of Shiva as Dakshinamurti. Each image is distinctive and different.
Another is the Vaikuntha Perumal temple. It does not have the opulence and the overload and visual impact of the Kailasanatha temple, but there's a remarkable cohesion in the various structural elements which provide for an integrity and unity of design.
The lions are a leitmotif of Pallava architecture, and the Vishnu temple is no exception.
The outside walls, too, have these leaping lions embodying Pallava magnificence.
கார்மந்து நீள் விசும்பும் கடலும் சுடரும் நிலனும் மலையும் தன்னுந்தி தார்மன்னு தாமரை கண்டனிடம் தடமாமதில் சூழ்ந்து அழகாய கட்சி தேர் மன்னவனை தென்னவனை சிறையில் வாட்டிய தின் சிலையோன் பார்மன்ன பல்லவர் கோன் பணிந்த பரமேஸ்வர விண்ணகரம் பரமேஸ்வர விண்ணகரம் அதுவே.
The seated Vishnu on the ground floor is magnificent in his kingly splendor. The Shankha and Chakra are held in his back pair of hands, and of the front pair, one is the Abhaya Mudra, fingers facing up in a gesture of protection, and the other in a gesture of giving, the Varada Mudra. The Sayana Perumal or Vishnu lying on Adishesha, the divine serpent, is on the first floor.
Although images of some of the Pallava kings in caves and some of the Rathas have been identified as those belonging to Simha Vishnu, Mahendravarman I, Narasimhavarman I, and Parameswaravarman, there is no mention of these sculptors.
Rajasimha was proud of his naval force, and there was great maritime activity during his time. He is also said to have sent ambassadors to China.
His rule was marked by great literary activity as well, and the scholar and rhetorician Dandin spent time at his court.
The interactions of culture and scholarship brought about by mutual cultural enrichment.
Huin Sang, the Chinese explorer and Buddhist scholar, visited Kanchipuram and described the prosperity and contentment of its people in his writings.
He writes that the Buddha or Tathagata in the olden days, when living in the world, frequented this Kanchipuram much. He preached the law here and converted men, and therefore Asoka Raja built stupas all over the sacred spots where these traces exist.
While there is no actual evidence of the Buddha's visit, Kanchipuram was considered a holy spot by the Buddhists.
Bodhidharma, the founder of Dhyana Marga, who lived in the 6th century, was thought to be a prince of Kanchipuram.
The renowned teacher, Dhammapala, who later became the head of Nalanda University, was also born in Kanchipuram and studied under Dinanga in the city.
Mahendravarman wrote a satirical play in Sanskrit called Matta Vilasa Prahasana, where he made fun of Jain priests as well as Buddhists and Saivites, focusing on inebriated priests and their paramours and mocking certain aspects of organized religion. He also made fun of the judicial process with a tongue-in-cheek reference to the Adhikarna or the apex court in Kanchipuram, where he says jokingly that no struggle or no argument could ever be resolved impartially in this court. And the subject says, why? That person has many riches, got it from the many monasteries, and with it he can stuff the mouths of every court official as he pleases. Whereas I am the maid of a poor kapalin, and the only wealth I have is the snake skin and the sacred ash on me. What wealth am I that I should go and argue in the courts?
Corruption was apparently no stranger to public processes. All the villages had assemblies and courts that were under royal supervision and control.
Pallava inscriptions indicate that a judicial body called Dharma Sena also existed to continuously dispense justice, often through committees that operated regularly.
Both sugar and salt were manufactured by the administration, and there was a royal monopoly on these.
Tax was levied on those belonging to many professions, on toddy tappers, cattle breeders, washermen, drummers, goldsmiths, even producers of ghee.
Well, a fee had to be paid to the village headman, which was hereditary post.
A small offering had to be given to the king when there was a wedding in the family.
As the citadel of Jain, Buddhist, Vaishnava, and Shaiva learning and worship, in many ways, the capital of the Pallava Empire, Kanchipuram, exemplified the generally syncretic cultural moorings of the Tamil people.
We move from Kanchipuram to Madurai.
The Pandyas were the only dynasty in India that had a continuing presence and did indeed rule in some form or the other for more than 2,000 years. Their first mention being in the inscriptions of Emperor Ashoka dating as early as the 3rd century.
Madurai Kanchi of the Sangam literature, 1st century CE, describes the city of Madurai.
In the city where drums roar constantly.
Festivals are celebrated on the wide streets.
Sunangai dances are performed.
There are communities with fragrance.
And there are many citizens with
Abundant
abundant wealth.
Paripadal of Sangam literature speaks of Madurai.
மாயோன் கொப்போள் மலர்ந்த தாமரை பூவோடு புரையும் சீரூர் பூவின் இதழகத்து கனய திருவம் இதழகத்து அரும் புகட்டு அனைத்தே அண்ணல் கோயில் தாதின் நனையர் தன் தமிழ் கொடிகள் தாது உன் பறவை கனையர் பரிசில் வாழ்ன.
Idayagat Anayattiruvum refers to the structure of streets, even as we see it today in Madurai, a continuum of over 2,000 years. The magnificent Meenakshi temple is not only a symbol of the Madurai of today, but it has stood for centuries, from its legendary origins to its popular present-day appeal, through the vicissitudes of time, withstanding the ravages of war and occupation.
Rebuilt many times and yet standing tall with its towering gopurams right from the Pandya period through the Nayak era.
It appears that the main deity at this time, Shiva, was known as Chokkar or Chokkanadar, and Angayar Kanni was the name of the Devi, his spouse.
However, despite the firm establishment and patronage of Tamil by the Pandya kings during the centuries of Pandya rule, in the Nayak period, the Telugu-speaking rulers who had an affinity to Sanskrit changed the Tamil appellations of these deities to Meenakshi and Sundareshwarar.
Thirunyana Sambandar, an early proponent of the Bhakti movement, who came to Madurai to cure the Pandya king of an illness and convert him to Saivism from Jainism at the secret behest of his queen Mangayarkarasi, met the queen at the temple and guaranteed her that he would heal the king and bring him back to the fold.
The British collector of Madurai, Roose Peter, who was the temple's administrator between 1812 and 1828. See, although being a Christian, he had great respect for the goddess, and he was popular and well-liked in the city. In fact, his nobility of character earned him the title Peter Pandian. Now, every day as he crossed the temple on his way to office, he would stop, get off his horse, remove his hat and his shoes, and walk past the temple barefoot, bowing his head in obedience to the deity. One day, there was a massive downpour, and the Vaige was in spate. He was convinced that it was the goddess Meenakshi who rescued him. And so he donated a beautiful pair of padukas encrusted with diamonds and rubies to the barefoot girl who had rescued him. After his retirement, he remained in Madurai, as he never wanted to be far away from his deity. And as per his request, upon his death, he was buried in the churchyard that faced the temple so that he could always worship his goddess.
Prosperity clothed the city, creating a society that was affluent but hierarchical.
Caste-oriented, militaristic, and yet filled with opportunities.
But what is remarkable is that there is great evidence of an originality of approach and a pioneering way of thinking that was sustained over several generations.
And this can only be wrought by a collective of people.
Albeit at the behest of a king or kings who had the imagination.
The spirit to build small towns, new capitals, ports, create systems of taxation and land grants.
Organize water supply, bring about agricultural transformation.
There are innumerable Jain monuments in this region, and indeed, they are a very remarkable on-ground testament that assert a strong practice of the faith across southern Tamilagam, especially around Madurai.
When we visited Karugumalai, that most magnificent Jain edifice carved on a rock, we saw that only a few hundred yards away, the Shaivas had also created an astonishing but unfinished temple called Vettuvan Kovil, hidden initially from the side of a hillock. Rising up without warning is a structure of extraordinary beauty. This is an early Pandya temple, possibly belonging to the 8th century.
The temple structure itself is a magnificent construction, carved out of a huge rock of granite, as if emerging from a crater blasted out of the surrounding rock, with the gopuram cut first from top.
We looked down a few stories at the layers of carved walls, tier upon tier, sculpted with intricacy, and great artistic intelligence. Every single symbol of divinity carved in this stone reveals a rich range of expression and emotion. To the right of our climb, towering carvings and the bas-relief sculptures of rows of Tirthankaras on the rocky hillside.
Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Uvajayanam, Namo Loe Savasahunam.
That was once an eminent place of Jain learning, a center that lasted for more than 400 years from the 8th to the 12th century. Women ascetics were accorded an equal status as that of male monks.
Let's hear about the cave paintings of Jain art.
On a balmy pre-monsoon morning, we drive to Pudukkottai. A garland of small hillocks leads us to a natural cavern on one hillock with 17 Jain beds carved on the rock floor, dating back to at least 200 BCE. Many have Tamil Brahmi inscriptions ascribed to the 2nd century BCE.
Beyond the immediate splendor of the pillars, in the cave, there is an austere image of Parshvanatha, a Tirthankara who supposedly lived and taught in 7th century BCE.
Almost in contrast is a magnificent ceiling painted with a Michelangelo-like diligence.
An amazing blue lake, limpid in a forgotten sunlight, washes over the unsuspecting visitor. Here lotuses bloom, pink and white, and fish abound, leap joyously to the skies, and elephants twirl lotus blossoms in their trunks, some of them spraying water. Buffaloes, grazing on the water's edge, tilt their heads curiously as exotic birds fly in and out of the lush vegetation that surrounds the lake. There is nothing immobile on this surface. Dancers welcome travelers from green banks as monks dip themselves into the holy blue waters and offer prayers.
Scholars are in general agreement that this lake is Katika Bhumi, the heavenly tank where the faithful greet the monks who are moving on their journeys of self-discovery towards enlightenment.
A space where the Tirthankara sits on a dais and preaches to all beings, man, animal, and bird, who gather there to understand the essence of Jain philosophy. The emphasis is on equality among all living things.
Both Jain monuments and Hindu temples flourished equally under royal patronage until the Bhakti movement gained momentum from the 10th century.
Some of Tamil's literary works had a strong Jain undertone, notably those composed in the early pre- and post-Christian eras.
These include the Tirukural by Tiruvalluvar.
These 1,330 verses of the Tirukkural embody primary life principles in 3 books.
Aram, Porul, Inbam, that is, of virtue or goodness, of wealth or practical wisdom, of love.
In pithy, crisp language, complex moral and philosophical ideas are conveyed.
Marco Polo writes, "Here are no horses bred, and therefore, indeed, a large part of the country's wealth is wasted in purchasing horses. Indeed, the king over here wishes to purchase 2,000 horses this year, as do his 4 brothers. And the reason for this is, by the end of the year, not more than 100 of those horses will remain alive, as most of them die off."
Traversing the dusty country roads that circle the villages near Madurai, I noticed the unusual spectacle of hundreds of painted terracotta horses massed together near a hamlet. The sight was startling in its unexpectedness. Quiet green fields, sleepy hamlets with little human movement, and then suddenly a burst of color and a crowd of strident presences, much like the army of terracotta warriors in Xi'an in China.
Local potters are commissioned to make the terracotta horses by farmers who offer these horses to the gods in gratitude for rain or for plentiful harvest. In the summer months, they are taken in procession with song and dance to be dedicated to the temple.
Ayyanare purayya, ayyanare purayya, purayya. விவசாயம் செழிக்க மழை பெய்யா, பெய்யா. குதிரை ஏறி வருவாய் கண்ணு 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 கண்ணு. வீரனாரே எங்க வீரனாரே, வணக்கம் வச்சோம் முன்னடியானுக்கு வணக்கம் வச்சோம்.
The festival is called Puraviyeduppu, which is an offering of horses to Ayyanar, a fierce watchman of the village, who in his nightly rounds protects the community from harm.
Marco Polo says, "This province is the finest and noblest in the world. The king ruler here goes by the name of Sundar Bandidevar, and in his kingdom you will find very fine and great pearls. You must also know that in all of this province you will not find a tailor who will cut or stitch any cloth, as everyone over here seems to roam around in unstitched cloths."
The king goes as bare as the rest. Only around his loins he has a piece of fine cloth. And around his neck he has a necklace of fine precious stones, rubies, sapphires, emeralds, and the like.
Marco Polo describes other facets of Pandya society that he finds fascinating, including the fact that many people bathe twice a day and look down on those who did not do so.
He also notes that they smear their bodies with sesame oil and clean their houses with cow dung.
And that there is a great interest in astrology and magic, and is amused by the fact that mighty duels can occur if someone spits on someone else, often leading to the death of one of the contestants. They are strict at dispensing justice, he says. But lechery is not considered a sin.
The Chola dynasty, maritime empire, art and architecture.
And administration.
Turning off the highway towards Tanjavur, no matter how many times one visits and drives over the bridge towards the city, the vision of the towering Vimana against the sky, which could be a cloudless blue or soft twilight pink, is completely breathtaking.
To talk about Rajarajeshwaram or Brahadeeshwara, the Periyakovil as people refer to it as a whole, is important as it is the most extant and visible symbol of Chola power and might.
The execution of this architectural masterpiece involved not just meticulous planning and vision, but a different way of thinking, which ensured that it functioned and survived as an independent institution that supported many people.
Artisans, artists, craftspeople, officials, and a great many others in long-term arrangements. The temple was a world unto itself, and innumerable endowments made it a focal point that sustained a myriad art forms like music, devotional dances, and painting.
The murals in Brahadeeshwara are the result of the persona of the patron, Rajaraja, and that of the painter.
While Rajaraja's memory was inerasably etched in the annals of history, the Chola painter, like most brethren of his fraternity of this ancient land, has completely vanished into oblivion without any record mentioning him.
கல்லால் நிழல் மேய கரை சேர் கண்ட கல்லால் நிழல் மேய கரை சேர் கண்ட என்று எல்லா மொழியாலும் இமையோர் தொழுது ஏத்தவில்லா அரண் மூன்றும் வெந்து விழ எய்த நல்ல நமை ஆழ்வான் நல்லம் நகரானே.
Thus sang Thirunyana Sambandar on Shiva of what is now called Koneri Rajapuram, the Tirunallam temple. This Uma Maheshwara temple, built around 10th century CE, shows the king and his queen, Sembian Mahadevi, carved in a worshipful stance to the main deity.
Sembian Mahadevi was an unusual woman who built and restored more than a dozen temples in South Talkat, Chengalpettu, Kumbakonam, and Tanjavur.
While repairing a Pandya temple built by Varaguna Pandya, a mortal enemy of the Cholas, she carefully preserved the Pandyan king's inscription and placed it back after the repairs were done, adding an additional inscription that placed her own renovation as well as his in an accurate historical context.
No writing on the Cholas and their history can be complete without touching on the sacred bronzes that often reflects the high point of Chola artistry.
Many superb bronzes of this era have been stolen, lost, even from the Brahadeeshwara temple, or exported and installed in museums abroad. Of the 66 images described in the inscriptions of Rajaraja at the Tanjavur temple, only 2 remain.
Rajaraja brought back under Chola control all the land that was lost to them.
At the height of his power, his kingdom extended from Sri Lanka in the south to the Tungabhadra basin in the north and the Mahendra mountains in the northeast.
Rajaraja organized a land survey quite unlike anything ever done before by any ruler in India. It was extremely detailed.
The Chola rulers vigorously encouraged Brahmin settlements, the Brahmadeyas, particularly all along the fertile Kaveri basin.
This practice of donating large tracts of land to the Brahmins began in the days of the Pandya kings.
The setting up of such social hierarchies and privileges became problematic later with the unequal access to wealth and resources.
The Kundavai Jainalaya, the serene Jain temple, constructed and donated by Rajaraja's sister Kundavai, attracts pilgrims from across Tamil Nadu.
Tamil and Grantha scripts from the Chola through to the Vijayanagar periods indicate that numerous gifts and donations were made, including tax-free land grants to support the Jain temple complexes, just as in the case of Hindu temples.
Buddhist viharas were also supported by royal patronage, although Buddhism was not as active a faith as Jainism during the medieval period in Tamilnadu.
Those Chola rulers were also ruthless in their wars and conquests.
Decapitation, severing were not at all uncommon in the courts of the Chola kings.
The Cheras.
Set in a lush green coast extending from the rolling mountains of the Western Ghats all the way down to the tip of the continent, enclosing backwaters where the glistening sea formed inlets and small islands, dotted the waterways, was a great way to a great and wondrous land.
Tamilagam derived great prosperity during the early Chera rule from the trading of spices, ivory, timber, pearls, and gems.
The Vaishnavite poet saint Kulashekara was a Chera king of the 9th century who came to be known as Kulashekara Alvar and wrote the celebrated Perumal Tirumuri in Tamil and Mukundamala in Sanskrit.
இருளிரிய சுடர் மணிகளிமைக்கும் நெற்றி தானும் தும் தானும் தானும் தும் தும் தாயினத்துத்தி அணி பணமாயிரங்களார்ந்த தானும் ததானும் 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 தும் தும் ததாரவரச பெருஞ்சோதி அனந்தனென்னும் மணிவிளக்கு முயர் வெள்ளை அணையமேவி திருவரங்க பெருநகருள் தென்னீர் பொன்னி திரை கையால் அடிவருட பள்ளி கொள்ளும் கருமணியை கோமளத்து கண்டு கொண்டு என் கண்ணினைகள் என்று கொலோ கழிக்கும் நாளே கழிக்கும் நாளே கழிக்கும் நாளே.
That is by Kulashekara Alvar on Vishnu.
By the 13th and 14th centuries, with the development of Malayalam, these regions evolved into Kerala and became a part of Kerala's history rather than that of Tamilagam.
The grand Marathas of Tanjavur.
When the dynasty of Maratha rulers established their rule in the capital city of the Cholas of Tanjavur, an unusual amalgam of cultures occurred.
Tamilagam, while cradling its own civilizational values, opened itself up to winds of cultural change that came from a variety of sources.
Serfoji was the last Maratha ruler to have power.
Serfoji's patronage of the arts during this embattled period saw a flowering that was quite unusual despite the chaos of political administration.
The Tanjavur quartet, the maestros of dance, brothers Chinnaya, Ponnaya, Vadivelu and Sivanandam, flourished at that time and set in place the flowering of Bharatanatyam. The Sadir that came just before that was performed to a high degree of refinement by the Devadasis or temple dancers who also danced at the courts of kings.
மாவேரி குயில்கள் கூவுதே ஏனியன் செய்குவன் மாவேரி குயில்கள் கூவுதே ஏனியன் செய்குவன் மாவேரி குயில்கள் கூவுதே செய்குவன் மாறன் கனைகள் தூவுதான் சரமதி கனைகள்
Mohamana, an iconic composition by the Tanjai Nalvar, performed by Bharatanatyam dancers even today.
The Saraswati Mahal Library, which was built by a Nayak ruler, was vastly enriched by Sarfoji.
He added maps, coins, rare manuscripts, and about 4,000 books from across the world.
Some of them are
Were
marked
marked up with his comments in his own hand.
There are classics as well as rare works of Jain, Vaishnava, and Shaiva origin, including commentaries on Sangam works.
Along with the Vedas and Shastras, he advocated the learning of mathematics, science, and languages in schools.
Throughout the rule of the Maratha dynasty, the bureaucracy, largely made up of Maratha and Telugu immigrants, reduced the role of the Tamil laborers, pushing them into poverty.
While Muthu Tandavar from the 17th and Arunachala Kavirayar and Marimuthu Pillai from the 18th century, known as Tamil Mover, had ushered in the form of compositions known as kritis in Carnatic music, another great revival happens with Tyagaraja Swamigal, Muthuswami Dikshidhar and Shama Sastri, the trinity who create their compositions in Telugu and Sanskrit during the Maratha period.
The compositions of the Trinity, as they are known, are sung widely by all practicing musicians even today.
Let's hear a Tamil composition by Muthu Tandavar on Shiva Nataraja of Chidambaram.
ஆசைப்படார் அருள் பாராய் பதம் தாராய் துயர் தீராய் புலியூராய்.
Tamil by birth, Muslim by faith.
Trade between the Arab countries in South India, both by way of the Malabar coast and the Coromandel coast, had been going on even during the Sangam age, as early as 200 CE, as recorded in Sangam literature.
When the Arabs became Muslims, possibly in the late 7th century, they brought their new religion to South India.
Many Arab merchants settled in Tamaragam and married local women. Thus, a distinct community of Tamil Muslims was born.
There is a small little known mosque in Trichirappalli, which has an authentic inscription from the 8th century CE that indicates the age of Muslim presence in that area.
Social divisions are not caste hierarchies in the Tamil Muslim community.
As for group names, Sonagan is the term for those of Arab descent. Tulukar means one who rides a horse. In Tamil Nadu, it's sometimes used to describe Muslims in a generic sense. There is a coastal Muslim community known as Shafi.
ஆதி முதலே கண்ட பரிபூரணமென்றோதும் குணக்குடி கொண்டோனே நிராமயமே தேசிகனானென்றே திருநடனமாடுகின்ற வாசாம கோஷரமே வாழி நிராமயமே கண்ணே மணியே கண் நிறைந்த மெய்ஞான வெள்ளியே நிராமயமே.
This is by Gunangudi Mastan Sahib, a Sufi saint who lived in the 18th century.
Christendom in Tamilakam.
Madurai, November 1606. The rains lashed the city and the streets were flooded. A strange figure clad in a dhoti and a priest stuffed waded unsteadily on his wooden sandals through the city's narrow lanes. He seemed unaffected by the rain and the wind. Striding purposefully, he was a man on a mission. Now the other people, cowering from the rain, stared at him, not knowing what to make of this strange white man, the likes of whom they had never seen before. By the looks of it, he seemed like one of the priests from the temples. Yet, his coloring was so pale that they all wondered if he was stricken by some sort of deadly illness. Roberto di Nobili, smiling to himself, was fully aware at the consternation of those around him.
Missionary, scholar, and nobleman, Roberto di Nobili was an Italian.
He learned Sanskrit, Telugu, and Tamil, and followed Hindu or Indian customs. In the process of acculturation with the local population, he found a way forward to teach the Christian doctrine.
He used words like Vedam for Bible, Puja for Mass, Prasadam for grace.
Di Nobili died in Mylapore in Chennai in 1656, having contributed much to Tamil Christian literature and philosophy.
In the centuries that followed, others like the Nobili, who adopted a novel approach to communicating the word of Christ, include C.J. Beshi, Robert Caldwell, G.U. Pope, and Andre Dubois.
மன்னிய முடியோ முடியின் மாமணியோ வானிடை பயங்கு செஞ்சுடரோ புண்ணிய உடலத்து உயிர் கொலோ முகமோ புலம் முக கண் கொலோயோ கண்ணியளவு அற்று இடம் எல்லாம் நிறைந்த கடவுள் தான் உறைந்து அருள் காட்ட பண்ணிய அம்மா நகர் இடைப்பகலை படித்து எரி பரந்த ஆலயமே.
This is by Beschi on Jerusalem in his Tembavani.
They were all scholar missionaries, ethnographers, linguists, and historians, lovingly adopted into the Tamil fold. And their writings are still an important source of first-hand observation and analysis.
It is the missionary G.U. Pope's translation that apparently drew Mahatma Gandhi to the Kural.
One of his last requests was for his tomb to be inscribed with a student of Tamil. In a copy of his last sermon, which he delivered at Balliol, he wrote a simple foreword in his own hand. In the heart of this, my last sermon, lie truths which harmonize with all that is very best in Tiruvachakam and Shivajnanam. I am very old. May the Father bless you and yours.
The distinct story of the Tamils is, in the end, a story of multiple narratives, of the multitude of poets and kings.
Artists, builders, writers, resistors, scholars,
And ordinary people who with just language as their sacred base built their history in temples, mosques, churches, fields, and factories.
Searching as many people do for answers to the mysteries of the human experience.
Their origins, buried in prehistory, brought to light by diligent explorations and archaeological endeavors, trace the continuity of a civilization that goes back nearly 5,000 years.
வாழிய செந்தமிழ் வாழ்க நற்றமிழர் வாழிய பாரத மணி திருநாடு இன்றமை வருத்தும் இன்னல்கள் மாய்க நன்மை வந்தெய்துக தீது நகலுக அறம் வளர்ந்திடுக மரம் மடி உருக அறம் வளர்ந்திடுக மரம் மடி உருக எங்கள் வாழ்வும் எங்கள் வளமும் வாழிய 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 வாழியவே.
We request Prasanna Ramaswamy to come to the
here.
stage.
She's here.
Thank you. Thank you, darling.
Very quickly, we would like to thank everybody who helped us to do this evening show. Arvind at the sound and Srinivasan at the light, and Tanisha with the technique, and Parthasarathy who sorts the material for the projection, and our friend who introduced us all, and the entire team of the festival. Then the list is so long. If I start saying the names, I'll definitely miss somebody. So the entire team from Vikram, Sagar, Kritika, everybody. And thank you, all of you, and thank you, Nirmala, for giving us this opportunity.
Big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Prasanna Ramaswamy, a token of appreciation from Dr. Nirmala Lakshman. It was just a breathtaking performance from the entire team. Thank you so much.